Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us on DW News Africa. These are tough economic times at the moment. How can African countries respond to these circumstances to prevent social unrest?
Well, first and foremost, let's get started things right about Africa. Despite all the headwinds that Africa faces globally in terms of global inflation, but also in terms of rising debt levels and depreciation of currencies, and of course, climate change, Africa continues to post very, very resilient growth. And in fact, 11 out of the 20 countries that are in the world, fastest growing countries in the world, are actually in Africa. So African economies are quite resilient. But I think the major issues that we have to make sure that we do is still continue to provide a lot of concessional financing to African countries, because there's still a tapering effect of the COVID-19 situation that countries still coping with many of the consequences.
Right. Speaking of climate change, you go into some of these meetings with these global sessions. A lot of these big polluters make commitments about what they're going to do in terms of compensating and supporting the poorer countries. But we see these commitments, we hear these commitments, but we don't actually see them being followed through. How do you make sure these countries are held accountable?
Look, today, Africa loses between $7 and $15 billion a year because of climate change. So the issue is to make sure that we support Africa that did not cause climate change to be able to adapt to climate change. And that's what we're doing at the African Development Bank. But in addition to that, we have major programs, and we're showing global leadership on this particular issue of climate for Africa. We have what's called the African Disaster Risk Insurance Facility, which essentially simply just pays for premiums of countries to be able to get compensated or get payouts when they face exogenous and devastating impacts of climate change. And it works well. It works in Malawi, which helped millions of farmers in Malawi that face drought. It's helped over 1 million plus farmers in Madagascar that had that. We've done it in Niger and several other countries.
How can African countries grow their own internal expertise and funding for development initiatives, for, as we talked about climate change, but also even things like supporting structures against corruption, for example? How can all these be built almost independently, if I put it that way?
Look, Africa has today the highest irradiation of sunlight in the world. And therefore, it has over 60% of the world resources in solar. Africa should be a global powerhouse when it comes to solar renewable energy. Africa has today 65% of the remaining uncultivated arable land in the world. So Africa should be a global powerhouse in food and agriculture. If you take a look at the more than almost $57 trillion that's going to come in future from the electric cars and also batteries and all of that, Africa is where you have the copper, you have the lithium, you have the cobalt, you have many of this graphite and all the things. So Africa should be there. So what I'm saying is that at the African Development Bank, we take pride in marketing Africa as an investment destination. That's important, but you have to mobilize a lot more domestic resources. And one of the areas where I think African countries can do better, and they need to do better with support, is how they get paid for their natural resources, or should I say, not get paid well for their natural resources. I really think that if we are able to get good public financial management done, make sure that we are managing our natural resources very well, price them very, very well, make sure those that need to pay taxes are paying taxes, and therefore you can mobilize a lot more resources, and make sure they are having structural change in the agricultural sector to make sure we can actually feed ourselves. We are going to be able to deal with many, many of these agents.
Okay. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the Africa Development Bank. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.